The dancing never gets old, I tell you. He's just jigging away down there. I love it. Folks, welcome to another fantastic week of Financial Fitness with Patrick, presented by Soaring Profits Media. And I know I opened this for the last little while every week with what a week, what a week, what a week. But this one's been a dud. It's been kind of a choppy week in the trading aspects. Not a lot of information coming out other than some of the earnings that we've seen over the last week, week and a half. We got through the big. We got the mega caps out of the way. We got Apple. We got we're waiting on Nvidia. We got the big boys are continuing to keep on the track. Microsoft, sees a massive stimulus from the federal government in the United States. We're looking at $645 billion in buybacks over the last decade in Apple, keeping them afloat. But what's happening with the consumer that buys all this stuff? And, we've got General Mills. This is a cereal company echoing that FedEx fears of warning about weaker demand for their products. This is cereal. This is your children's future and your children's morning. We have PepsiCo earnings beats estimate, but product recalls and weaker, lower income consumers a concern. The consumer is falling apart. The pricing power that has been inflationary, that has caused these rates to continue moving up to fight inflation over the last 3 years, is hollowing out, is starting to fall apart. And, we look at what the real estate market is doing. We look at the way that the yields are moving. We had the 10-year bond yield today. Benign. Everyone thought that we were going to see rates pop again. What does this look like? Powell continues to say that I don't see the stag or the deflation. Well, we're seeing the stagnant growth. The consumer is slowing. We're seeing the side of inflation when it comes to your commodities, right? We're seeing energy continuing to move. We're seeing these utilities that are the bills of the families continuing to move up month over month over month. This is putting downward pressure on your consumer. Well, you're not going to go buy the new Apple AirPods when you can't afford your mortgage. And I think that segues perfectly into our guest today, Kelly Bonici of the Mortgage Group. She's actually a great friend of James, renegotiated a couple products for him recently and comes highly touted from him. So Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today. I understand you're in the mortgage business in Canada. That has to be a little bit wild, would you say, at this point? What are you seeing as far as trends in the Canadian market? What are your customers coming to you? Because you've got to start seeing these families that are sort of getting crushed a little bit. And what are their concerns right now for your clients?
Yeah, so definitely a few different things happening. One of the big ones that you're kind of touching on is people who are up for renewal coming, and maybe they have a rate of as low as the high ones, low twos, and they're renewing into an environment of, at the very lowest, high fours, but anywhere up from there, right? So their payments are going up at least a few $100s a month. And so I'm getting a lot of people shopping around, hoping that they can do better than their renewal offers. And then, of course, there's the first-time buyers trying to get into the market. And, it's that balance of rate versus price, right? Some people are thinking, oh, do we wait for prices to come down, rates to come down? But obviously those things are on a bit of a seesaw, right? When one happens, the opposite happens in the other markets. So yeah, it's definitely interesting times. I think we're having more of a normal spring market this year, whereas like the past few years with the pandemic, spring market started in February, March, but it's more starting to pick up now. Yeah.
So what are you seeing in regards to that? Again, the consumer, and I'm going to say that mid-level consumer. I've got, multifamily residential, and I'm seeing my tenants being constrained, right?
Sure.
I'm noticing, where the rent was maybe a day or two late, now you're 3 and 4 days. There tend to be more excuses. There seems to be some downward pressure on that consumer. When you're having people coming in, let's stick with the first-time home buyer, and then we'll kind of because I really do think a lot of our American viewers out there don't understand the way that our mortgages work.
Okay.
We have a long amortization period, but we have a very short term rate.
Mm-hmm.
So that is very different than these, 3% 30-year products that you're getting into the United States, where you're just like, buy everything at 2 or 3% and never look at it again.
Imagine. And
Yeah.
how do their prices stay so low in comparison to those kind of opportunities, right?
Well, so that's sort of my question. Obviously, when you have lower rates, you're qualifying for higher mortgages. So
Hmm.
now, as you're seeing people, as you're seeing the rates exponentially increase over the last 2.5, 3 years, what does that look like as far as qualifying? And then what is that doing to the overall value of the market? And I ask it because of this. We've brought up two different consumers. You have your first time home buyer,
Hmm.
and you have maybe someone that's owned a property for 20, 30 years. They have a ton of equity in that property. Maybe they're taking, a line of credit off that property, some sort of other lending material off of that. Those people are in two drastically different financial positions,
Hmm.
right? So as we're seeing those interest rates ratchet up,
Hmm.
what is that doing to the first time home buyer versus the wealth or perceived wealth of these
Yeah.
older individuals? And what are they bringing out of equity? Are they looking at, like most mortgages, 80/20, right? You can pull up to 80% equity out of these
Hmm.
mortgages. Are you seeing that a lot of these, and I'm going to call them the baby boomers just because of that, terminology, but are you seeing that people are leveraging back up to 80 in their later years to fight costs of borrowing, or are they highly built in equity that they've had for 25 years? What is that looking like when you're talking with people?
Yeah, I'm not seeing so many people coming back and looking to extract equity from products that they're or from properties that they're mortgage free on. More of what I hear, especially from older people that I know in a variety of different contexts, that they're just so happy to be mortgage free, right?
Right.
And unless they're looking to make some kind of a move, they're happy to stay that way. There are some instances I think where it makes sense to put like a home equity line of credit or something like that on a property to protect the title with some of the title fraud stuff that we've seen.
Right.
Um, but yeah, by and large, I don't get a lot of business from people who own their properties outright that are looking to extract equity.
So Kelly, that kind of leads into what I'm talking about as far
Mm-hmm.
as the lower end consumer. And I used a quote from CNBC tonight here talking about PepsiCo, talking about that lower income consumer that is falling off the tracks.
You're
And
right.
the reason for that is that the individuals that you're talking about, I'm going to call them, the higher net worth individuals, mortgages are paid off. They
Mm-hmm.
have that cash flow. They have the equity built into their homes. They have this product that, they don't have the mortgage rates exponentially increasing over the last 3 years like your average consumer is.
Mm-hmm.
They are still spending.
Yep.
They are propping up the economy. The problem is what happens when that pivots. And this is the concern that I think that most analysts have in my position right now when we're looking at the stock market, is that all we need is a perceived fear run in the market
Mm-hmm.
where wealth is hindered in any generating capacity, where they go, I'm fearful, I'm out.
Right.
And now you don't have an underlying consumer. So how does that affect the overall general market? That's scary. That's risk. That is a massive headwind in regards to buying these mega cap and even some of the smaller, mid cap stocks right now. What does it look like when that fear, that run, that bear positioning pulls into the market, where they go, oh crap, I'm out because I need to retain my wealth? There's no underlying consumer.
But aren't most investors more sophisticated than that in terms of like understanding that there's fluctuations in the market and it makes more sense to stick it out rather than pull out when things are have the perception of going down, because the only way to recover from going down is to stick it out and come back up, yeah?
So I don't disagree with you,
Mm.
but I also think that over the last 4 years, we have saw retail investing hit all-time highs. So
Okay.
this was your GameStop, this was your AMC, this was, Diamond Hands Boys, Bitcoin, like all of these things over the last 8, 9, 10 years. The gamification of the stock market has brought in retail investors. And I mean this with no disrespect to hairdressers, but there's an old adage that when you go to the barber shop and your barber's giving you stock picks, sell everything,
Okay.
right?
I've
And
not heard that. Yeah.
sort of where we are. And
Sure.
you can have a conversation with anybody and they're telling you about some crypto,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everybody's a crypto bro all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has this idea of what the next thing is going to be. So people stampede in, fear stampede out.
Sure.
And that's a very concerning issue, especially where and I promise you we're going to get to mortgages, but this is
No, it's all good.
when we see the underlying consumer that, especially in the United States, that has been bolstered with federal stimulus, now saying, I'm not going to pay $4 for a Monster Energy drink anymore, guys. I can't do it. Well, what happens? That pricing power is gone. Now, the only thing that we can do to stop that inflation that we've seen historically is a recession. It's the only thing that works, right? Historically speaking, we can soft land.
I was just going to say, what about the soft landing? Yeah.
Right. As much as you want. We can soft, you can have a bunch of people flapping their arms on the plane. we have to have a recession. It can be a dirty one, or it can be, weak, and it can be a softer recession, but we have to see unemployment pop. And that's where we are right now. And that's where I go back to the mortgage business.
Okay.
Someone like yourself that's seeing that right now, what sort of underwriting are you folks doing in deals? Are you looking at, 80-20? Are you looking at 90-10? What sort of hedging are you folks taking into the overall system? And in Canada with CMHC, we have some insurance where the United States doesn't in the same way. How is that stimulating, or how is it hindering our market right now?
Well, as far as the files that I'm seeing, I see a mix of both, like people coming in with 20% or more down and under 20% down. I don't know that I can really speak to how it's hindering or, helping the market. I guess, people being able to come in with that less than 20% down is obviously going to help keep things moving and provide opportunities for people that wouldn't have them otherwise. And, I always guide people towards putting 20% down if they have it.
Right.
If they don't have it, go ahead and put less than 20% down, because by the time you've saved 20%, your down payment relative to home prices is going to be worth less.
Right.
So just get in the market as soon as you can is my advice to people. And it's never about a hard sell, which is kind of a fine line to walk when you're in my position, right? But I try to give people the kind of advice that I would give to my family. I want what's best for people. And I think generally what's best is getting into the market as soon as you can. Obviously, if you got into the market as soon as you could in February, March of 2022, unfortunately, that wasn't a great time. But hindsight is the only way that you really know that, unfortunately, right?
So when you're talking with people, and the advice that you're giving there, I think is fantastic. It's something that I have used multiple times in my personal life when I'm in a position that I'm not an expert in the room. So what would you say to your mom or dad? What would be the advice that you would give them? And I will take that advice. I'm heeding what you're saying. And I love that, Kelly, that's what you're doing with your people. What would I want someone to tell me in this position? The thing that I'm concerned about now with, housing prices here in Canada is that, and for our American folks, you guys are in a very similar, issue right now, is that we have a massive immigration piece that's coming in and stimulating a lot of the real estate values. So, politically speaking, and, we won't go down, that train track too far because it can get kind of dark, but depending on where you fall politically, like there's parties in Canada that are saying that we are going to cap immigration very quickly. We need to stop this and stem this because of the housing shortages and the prices affiliated with that. Do you think that we can continue going down this line at, 6, 8, 10% increasing property values for the next 10 years? Or do you feel that we are coming into some sort of bubble position that if we have a political, upheaval and we shut down, the spigot of immigration, do you think that's going to have a negative effect on our housing?
I think one of the big issues in Canada is that we are so undersupplied that even for the population that we have here and the rate of population growth that we have without immigration, we're going to be hard pressed to have enough housing for everybody over the next few decades. So yeah, that's my take, is that we're already so woefully undersupplied, and there's no quick, there probably are some quick fixes to that. Do I have faith that the powers that be are going to implement those quick fixes in a way that actually helps? I'm an optimist, but it would take minimum 10 years if all hands on deck and we're really, really working hard to get things sorted out. But we don't even have the number of tradespeople to build the homes, and then at the municipal level rather, the processes are so slow and stymied by red tape. I just feel like at this point, everywhere we turn, there's different kinds of roadblocks, and I think we're unfortunately deep into a problem that's going to take some time to solve. And I think the supply side is really what's going to keep pricing higher. Obviously there's interest rate factors that put a run on things at certain times.
Yeah.
But
well, I think that's a great example. So all of that sounds inflationary. You have a supply constraint, right? So why? It's
just a matter of the pace of that inflation, right? Which would be sped up by lower rates,
right,
and slowed down by higher rates.
My question is that these people that are waiting on the sidelines to be going, I'm waiting for 2% rates again. Are we in a higher for longer, higher interest rate normalcy that we have to get used to, and realizing that COVID made us realize that we have to onboard manufacturing, bring back certain amounts of our manufacturing. That's stimulating to the economy. That's going to be inflationary. Housing, we have such a shortage. We don't have the individuals to be able to create and produce the product, let alone the demand side of it. These are inflationary concerns. And when we look at Canada as a whole, and we're seeing, the GDP that is not growing at the rate, like we are just off the hairs of recession here already.
Yeah.
What does that say about the health of the underlying consumer in Canada? That's a concerning facet to me. And that's where we need one more headwind, and this could be nasty. But then is the government going to step in and stimulate? What are they going to do? Are they going to cut rates then? I don't see us getting back to 2 or 3% because we just can't.
I mean, one of the ways that I think about that is like if we think back to the 2008 financial crisis in the States and the impact that had on interest rates, right? We were back down to mortgage rates of like 2.5%, 3% on the heels of that. And then during COVID, we were down to the same rates or just a little bit lower. So given the state of the world, the economy, all of the different factors at play, is it not reasonable to expect that we can have these kinds of enormous crises every decade or two that are going to really suppress rates? Maybe the Bank of Canada has learned its lesson after what happened during the pandemic. But I think given the state of affairs on this continent and the world as a whole, I think it's not unreasonable to expect that rates could go down significantly again. Of course, the thing about predicting rates is it's totally a fool's errand because, although we have a sense of what direction things are going, the only way to know what's happening is retrospect, right? We have like different kinds of political instability and war and just unpredictability. So yeah, the only way to know what's happening is after it's happened and to have seen it play out, right? So
well, I'm getting a deal like that, and I don't think you're wrong. Like, okay, so let's take it every 10 to 15 years, we're going to have a calamity, right? How do you underwrite that deal? Like, how do you as a lender go, hey, this is what I'm expecting back on my return, but every maybe 15 years. So this deal twice, these negative amortization, maybe 3 times, who knows, I could be SOL. Like that is a massive risk obligation now that usually, and I think we look back on hindsight where it's like, well, everyone pays their mortgage. Well, we've built a whole industry about less and less of that. COVID made it very easy for us because we had government backup where they were saying, hey, listen, we're going to put limits. We're going to be able to hold off on your mortgages, have a conversation with your lenders. I can't remember the exact word. It's
payment deferral.
Yes. But we're going to do that every 15 years?
That was pretty exceptional, right?
Why?
Yeah, I don't know how long that lasted for anyone. I mean, I think people took advantage of that a month or two here or there, but it just added to their balances in the end, right? And to speak to the negative amortization, I think really the bank is winning on that front because it just means interest is so high that
the bank's like, oh no, don't make us do this.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll fight you on this in court later. Oh no.
We really hate it. Yeah.
Well, that's the problem, right? And as someone who owns property, as someone who deals with every aspect, we do financial fitness. We're dealing with, high level professionals like yourself. And then you go and you grab a coffee at Tim Hortons and you talk to people, because that's what we do with Soaring Profits. We talk to people all day.
Awesome.
And you see the difference and the dichotomy that we have. And the lower income person is getting hammered. And the higher income people, we continue to do really well and we laugh about it and go, oh, we're making lots of money, keep going.
And the gap keeps widening, right?
But what happens? Like historically, that does not end well.
Civil unrest.
Right. Like that's the scary part of this whole situation is at some point this house of cards shakes. And if you're not willing to help these people out and if you're making Tim Hortons money, and no offense to Tim Hortons people, right? If you're watching,
but it's just like, how are people getting by, right? Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. And it doesn't take long to look around at our cities. While you had a pretty good story in the green room, like it doesn't take long we see why this is a bigger problem. But
yeah,
Kelly, your business with the mortgage group, you folks are geared to help people like what we're talking about. If they're qualifying for a first-time home, come on in and talk with us in regards to maybe getting some people out of some sticky situations. I'm sure you've dealt with divorces. I'm sure you've dealt with, family members dying, closing things out, refinancing, all this sort of thing. How do people get in touch with you? And another thing is that, like, when you were a little girl playing with Barbies in the backyard, like, were you like negotiating mortgages? Like, what did that look like?
That was my favorite game. How did you know? Yeah. So as far as me getting into the industry, I had been self-employed for a long time, artist management for a while, web design for about a decade. And then at some point during my web design years, I was like, oh, I really need to figure out some kind of retirement plan. So I bought a couple of rentals, became friends with my mortgage broker. And at that point, I had really ambitious goals of wanting to buy a new rental every year for 10 years. I wanted to own 10 rentals. So I was just asking him questions all the time about how to qualify. And at one point, he was like, you should get your license and come work for me. And I was like, no way, no thank you. It sounds terrible, because he worked on all these really difficult B deals and was a great storyteller and loved to tell all these like war stories about how tricky it was to get these files funded. He unfortunately passed a little early. He was in his early 60s, but it was at his memorial service that I heard a number of people talk about how helpful he had been in their lives. And it really kind of opened my eyes to the more human side of the industry. And I was like, oh, this might actually be a good fit after all, because I've always really liked real estate. I love problem solving. I like math. I love people. So yeah, just kind of all came together, and no looking back. I'm 5 and a bit years in and really like what I do. Amazing.
I love it. And your organization now, your website, like I see you got Call Kelly that's rolling along the bottom here.
Yeah.
Is that your personal brand stuff, or what is that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then in Canada, to be a licensed mortgage agent, you need to be licensed under a brokerage. So the brokerage I work with is the Mortgage Group. And they're nationwide. I'm licensed with them in Ontario, and I can work across the country. But I mostly work with folks in the Peterborough area, throughout Ontario, sometimes GTA, sometimes in Vancouver, sometimes on the East Coast. So I'm able to work across the country with the help of some of my other colleagues as well.
I love it. Are you seeing a lot more interest in the broker side of things as opposed to, the big 4, big 5 kind of banks in Canada? A lot of people are coming to your desk and seeing that you guys can you folks can do a lot better rates for them, better work, find a better deal.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the advantages is we're able to shop the market for people, so they don't have to go and do that themselves, right? One credit pull, one application, and then access to, tens of lenders rather than just going to one of the big or 5 or 6 banks. And we have a number of the big banks in the broker channel as well. And then we have some more out-of-the-box solutions for people that can be a little harder to find the right fit for as well.
And then what does that look like as far as fee structures? I know individuals sometimes are concerned around, brokers. Do I have to go to pocket up front? What does that look like? How are you folks being paid in that type of situation?
Yeah, good question. So we're paid by the lender. There's 3 different tiers of financing. So A, which is like top tier, generally there's no fees. So I don't charge any fees on A files. That's best rates, best terms. And then there's B lending, also called subprime lending, for folks that have bruised credit or maybe they're self-employed and write off a lot of their income. I'll charge a small fee on that, like 0.5% usually, if anything, actually. Sometimes these days I'm mostly not charging any fees on those. And then there's private lending, which is quite expensive. We're talking 8 to 10% interest minimum. And then you're usually looking at 2 to 4% fees, and you're paying the lender's legal fees and all that kind of stuff. I rarely do privates. I don't like to do them. They've got a place, and there's people that specialize in that sort of thing. I'll do 1 or 2 private files a year, more as like an emergency, something has no time to close and that's our only option kind of thing.
Right.
I just prefer to stay away from it because it's just so pricey, and I want to help people with the option that's best for them, and it's usually not 10 or plus% interest.
Yeah. And you do find yourself in sometimes situations bridging a deal. You've got to go that route. And especially, and I hate to say it, that divorces happen.
Sure, yeah.
Situations sort of crumble at times, and you've got to figure out a way to handle that. So
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure when we get, beautiful, young, talented females that are in the finance space that are taking it on and really helping people that otherwise may be so totally ignorant and scared. It's one of the things that, doing this financial fitness, and we have people off the street talk to us, it's like you're talking at a level that it's kind of approachable. It's higher level, but you kind of make it fun and exciting. And it's because
I want it to be that. I want it to be approachable, absolutely.
Right. And it's because of people like you that allow us to have these conversations where people can come, they can engage in it. It doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, we don't talk about money, right? So I thank you so much. Phone number, an email, and a website. How do people get in touch with you?
Okay, yeah. So people can reach me at callkelly.com. So that's CALLKELLIE.com. They can reach me at 705-927-3560. And my email is kelly@callkelly.com. So that's, again, Kelly with an IE.
Perfect. Kelly, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. And from me,
Thank
folks,
you.
always, let's make some money together.